This is episode 369 of the Fun with the Maryland STEM Festival podcast, creating content for the library. This episode is recorded on September 30th, 2021. Hello, welcome to another episode of the Fun with the Maryland STEM Festival podcast. I'm your host, Phil Rogofsky, director of the Maryland STEM Festival. Today, I'm talking with Jason Turner. How are you today, Jason?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
Glad to hear that. Please tell us a little bit about your current position.
I am technically a program specialist with Montgomery County Public Library. In particular, I deal with the audio-video content creation as well as do a lot of their photo content. Pretty much I do anything that's media related for the library. I also do a lot of direction, production, creating short skits for the library, as well as promotionals and various other things that are happening or are needed for the library.
What kind of content are you involved with creating?
The content that I do promotes, as I said, the various programs. For instance, the last big one that I did was our Summer Read and Learn. That is a program that tries to promote the reading throughout the summer for students from K through high school. In that program, they do a number of different things to help promote or excite children to get going. So I took that idea and concept and created a couple of different videos over the summer that talked about what the program was. One that I'm working on now is related to the Maryland STEM Festival, whereas we are trying to promote STEM as a whole via what we are doing. We're trying to show all the different programs that we have that'll help push the agenda for STEM.
What do you like most about your current position?
Honestly, the people I work with. I got a great team of guys that we all are specialists in what it is we do. My boss is outstanding. She allows me the time and capability to do things the way I see it as the professional I'm supposed to be. And within tweaking, not very much of what I do gets changed, but I also have other vendors of people who can give me more of the, well, this isn't quite that, or that isn't quite this, those friends and those cohorts that are more specialists in what I do as I am. In all honesty, it's really the team that I like about my job.
You served in the military. Which branch did you serve in? Why did you enter? And what did you do while you were in the military?
That conversation is somewhat of a long conversation, but I will narrow it down as best as possible. As far as what I did in the military, I joined back in the late 90s, and I had two completely and totally different careers. During the first half of my career, I was what they call a fire control specialist. What I ended up doing was working on weapon systems and radar systems. My field kind of integrated a lot of science and tech, as well as a lot of math. The particular job I had at that time was one that was much older. The job in particular was being phased out for new technology. But because I started under the older system of ideas, or that older system, I was one of the few in that job classification that didn't just change out a circuit board, find a bad circuit board and change it. I actually many times had to go down to the various components on a circuit board, which meant I had to do a lot of understanding of AC and DC currents, how currents affected the entire circuit, understanding voltage, because it is quite something to get popped by 24,000 volts at any given time. It's happened not only me, but others.
I don't think you mentioned which branch of the military you were in.
I am a Navy veteran. And as far as the second portion of my career, I ended up in communications. Initially, I was trying to be more of a photographer because that is what I did prior to the military. And that is what I enjoyed at that point. But I ended up being more of a communications person. So I didn't just do photography, I did journalism, which also included being broadcasting both on television and radio. It also included going out to do a lot of production related items. So I was not only my own broadcast person, but I was also my own editor as well as my own production person. I wrote my scripts. I wrote and edited my own scripts and various other things like that. In the end, the last duty station that I was at was actually here at what is now Walter Reed, where there I was one of their military photographers within the medical branch. So I worked in a lot of different areas within the hospital, making certain that they could document a lot of the medical procedures that they were doing for our wounded warriors. I've been in the operating room, and I've been alongside a dental chair. We had a studio set up for specific medical or dental procedures where we could bring the client in and be able to take a lot of anything that they may have needed, which at that time primarily was more dental than anything else. Most, if you were doing anything medical, you would typically be in the OR room. And I did that, I was military for about 13 years before I ended up getting out myself because of medical issues. But I enjoyed most of my career because I went a lot of different places and saw a lot of different people. And that's one of the things that I enjoyed about the military, just being able to get out.
You said that you're into photography. Were you developing your own film when you started?
Absolutely. I did develop my own film. My photography career actually started because of a job that I had back in the early 90s when I got out of high school. I was selling camera equipment and video equipment and various other things. A buddy of mine kind of came to me and said, "Hey, let's go do something. Let's go do this photography thing." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm already doing photography with work and blah, blah." After 4, 5, or 6 times of my friend telling me, "Let's go do it," I thought about it and I said, "You know what? If I end up learning more, then I'll be better suited to talk about camera equipment, the electronics, the technology, why something was needed, how they work together, how an aperture of this allowed in a certain amount of light, and then the timing on your shutter speeds allowed for, with the two working together, allowed for you to get a particular type of image." And I learned all of this because of developing, because the class we took wasn't a photography class, it was a developing class, but it translated. Back when we were all still using film, the ideology roughly translates: aperture, shutters, light in or less light in, how much you do or don't see in the image. It just all translated. So it translated over well. It helped me in my career, I should say, in the job that I was doing at that point. It went well. So yes, I have learned about developing. I did mostly black and white developing. I did do some color, but with limits, because color is a lot more finicky than it always was. And in all honesty, I wouldn't mind getting back to it one day.
I guess you're all digital photography now?
For the most part, I still do have a lot of medium format cameras, or a few medium format cameras. I also have one large format camera that uses, I believe it's 8x10 sheets. And then I still have all of my old film cameras. Of my old film cameras, I typically tend to go to the mostly manual cameras over the ones that had more electronics, like the ones that were created in the early to mid 90s. I typically tend to use the ones that were created back in the 70s, because there's a lot more simplicity behind it, and therefore it makes me think about the art and the actual image that I go to take.
Where are you originally from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. Before 5, we moved around a couple of times from Chicago down south and back to Chicago. So as I said, ended up in Chicago from about 5 until I graduated high school, until a little bit after I graduated high school. Then I spent another 2 years kind of getting things done in Chicago, trying to create businesses for myself with photography related businesses, and then still ended up moving down south, where I spent 2 years in Alabama. After about the 2 years, a little bit less, I ended up going into the military. From that military time until around 2011, 2012, I basically only had about 3 jobs or careers that I've had. Unlike a lot of guys my age, where they probably have gone through 10 or 12 different gigs between high school and now, I can count on one hand how many I've had.
I enjoyed working with you last week and look forward to seeing your project on the Maryland STEM Festival. Thank you for talking to me today.
My pleasure. I appreciate you bringing me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fun with the Maryland STEM Festival podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate it and leave your comments wherever you got this podcast. That helps us get more listeners. Tell everyone you know to listen to this podcast. Have a stimulating day.